Good afternoon, everyone. Today is March the 4th, 2003. I'm standing in the center aisle of St. Augustine's Church in Larchmont, New York. My name is Father Joseph DeSanto. I'm an associate here in St. Augustine's Parish Community. Monsignor Walter F. Kenny is the pastor of the parish. Our purpose in making this video is to have an expert in the liturgical arts to look at the church building and to prepare us as we celebrate the 75th anniversary of this parish church and the 110th anniversary of the parish foundation. We are honored today in having with us this afternoon to help us understand the artistic merits of this church and one of the most prominent liturgical interior designers in the United States, Mr. Viggo Rambusch. Mr. Rambusch is now the Chairman Emeritus of the Rambusch Corporate Company, a very, very well-known and perhaps the most important liturgical interior design group in the United States. They have had many, many projects throughout the world. Mr. Rambusch served the United States Army with the United States Corps of Engineers in the topographical surveys that were done after the Second World War, both in Heidelberg and at the SHAPE headquarters in Paris. He is an interior designer. He has written many, many articles that have been published in many liturgical, architectural, and design journals here in the United States and elsewhere. He is well known as an artist, and we are most grateful in having him here with us this afternoon to explain to us the really magnificent church that St. Augustine's is.
Well, thanks again, Father, for the introduction. It was a bit presumptuous to say that I'm an expert. I'd rather be called a student of architecture. It's a field I love and have studied a great deal. And it's a pleasure to be in this English Gothic Revival building. The churches of the medieval times, which to some extent inspired this, became unpopular in the time of the Renaissance. And it wasn't until the 1840s when there was a great competition, like the competition we've just had here in New York City for the rebuilding of the World Trade Center. There was a competition for the rebuilding of the Houses of Parliament in London. And that was won by a man named Pugin. And Pugin began, or really made strong and powerful, the Gothic revival. And so it came on quite well, and the architect here, who built a series of buildings, worked in the tradition of the Gothic revival. We, of course, know that he built St. Augustine's, that he built St. Joseph's in Bronxville, St. Peter's in Yonkers, but we also had a few others surface through architect friends of my wife. He had his office, of course, on 57th Street, one point 11 West, another point 23 West, when he built this building, 37 West. And then we can also say that he built St. Albert's School at 156th Street in the Bronx, St. Thomas Aquinas in New York City about 1925. At 1855 Grand Concourse, he built an apartment house in 1936. He built the rectory at Holy Trinity Church in 1928 on 82nd Street. So he was active within the Catholic field, among other places. And I wonder whether the fact that an auxiliary bishop of New York, Bishop John Donne, who consecrated the altars in this church just before the church was dedicated, whether they were brothers. It could be that part of his connections with the Catholic Church were through his brother. But he certainly was an architect who loved Gothic revival. This building is probably late decorated, early perpendicular English Gothic. And we could start with the roof, which is an open timber English Gothic roof. And we could look up there. We'll see that it's absolutely beautifully pierced with the timbers going across, and nice Gothic tracery up there that then comes down and sits on the corbels. So in medieval architecture, the stone arches became so heavy that and spreading that you needed flying buttresses. But in the late Gothic period, where this building is, the timbered ceilings didn't have an outward thrust, a lateral thrust, and they sat on the corbels. So there wasn't that problem, and this is illustrative of that kind of a timber ceiling. So you have gorgeous woodwork up there. Then you have your clerestory walls. The plan here is of a sanctuary, then a great crossing, with 3 slightly smaller bays in the great crossing, and then 6 bays down through the nave. Those bays are just a little bit bigger than the 3 sections here in the great crossing. This is a Gothic parish church. It doesn't have a triforium. Many of the cathedrals have a third element, between the clerestory and the side aisle. But here we have these large clerestory windows, and then we have the side aisle. Then we come down from the walls and piers to the floor, and we have an absolutely magnificent tile floor. It's one of the treasures of the church, and it's very typical of the turn of the century. We've just restored the Minton tile floor in Central Synagogue in New York City. There was a fire there, and we went and salvaged the Minton tiles. They've had some additional ones made to replace the damaged ones, and then we cleaned all the existing, and they relaid the floor in Central Synagogue. And this is a little bit in that field. I think what everybody wants to hear is a discussion of the windows. They are made by the firm of Emil Frey, one of America's major studios, located in St. Louis. But these particular windows come from Munich. So probably Emil Frey's father was a German immigrant and a stained glass worker, and started that firm. And then the firm that made these windows is probably a second generation firm. Yes, sir.
I was just going to suggest these windows here are very, very different than the windows in the nave of the church here in the transept. They seem to be a very different quality. Are they by the same artist, would you think, or? Well,
I certainly noticed as I was looking at them with my binoculars that these 2 transept windows are quite different, and the side aisle windows are quite different than the main nave windows and the 3 windows in the sanctuary. The 3 in the sanctuary and the nave windows are heavier, I would say, because I know the name Emil Frey, I would say they're more Germanic. However, your historian has identified that all the windows went in at the same time.
That's right. Yes.
So were there 2 artists, or was it 1 artist? Frey certainly would have had more than one artist working in his studio. So I'm not sure. It's possible that they're all by the same man, but he would have had to change his style during the process of doing the windows. The backgrounds are different.
We know that these windows here, at least we believe these windows that look the same, were done by Scheffler, I believe his name was, an artist
Yeah.
from Connecticut.
That's the records, yeah.
Also, also a German immigrant himself, and did a lot of this kind of work. But I thought that was, indicative, but it seems so very different. That was the only reason for the
Oh, so
question.
Scheffler was not a employee of,
no.
oh, he was an independent artist.
He was independent.
Oh,
artist.
like in our studio, we often have an independent artist
That's right.
working.
I think he came in to do the work for Fry, and did the work, the designs and what have you, and then was handed on to the.
So maybe he was a friend of the architect or a friend of the pastor or connected in some way.
Yes.
Well, then that might say that Scheffler did the main clear-story windows and sanctuary windows, and then it was and Emil Fry had somebody in his studio do the transept windows and side aisle. It's a possibility.
It's a possibility.
Yeah. Now, the subject matter of the windows here, you have, of course, the Good Shepherd in the center with Our Lady on one side, and I believe the titular on the other, St. Augustine.
St. Augustine there. But
Yeah.
we really believe that that's probably St. Monica, the sister.
Oh, the sister of Saint.
Mother of Augustine.
Oh, okay.
We really kind of believe that's who that is now because of the symbolism around her.
Okay.
In those little circular.
Yeah, in the rondelles.
Right.
In the rondelles. Okay.
And,
Sure.
And
Well, I haven't been studying them that long and that deeply. But then in the transept, you have, of course, the nativity scene
yes.
with the three wise men and the shepherd on the other side, and then Joseph and Mary and the Christ child. And then if you go down into the side aisles, you have the early part of the life of Christ. You have the baptism in the Jordan by John the Baptist. Then you have the wedding feast at Cana,
Yes.
and I believe the teaching of the children.
I think the children in the Sermon on the Mount.
And right, and then you come over here into the agony, where you have the kiss of Judas, and the seizing of Christ, and then you have the crowning of thorns and scourging at the pillar and the crucifixion. So you have that whole life of Christ after Nativity moving around, and for some reason, you finish with St. Lucy,
Yes.
who is the patron of those who need help with their sight. And she's also a patron of Scandinavian people.
That's right. Indeed. That's right. Yeah. Scandinavian.
Yeah.
The idea being, and I think of St. Lucy also, is the fact that the person who gave
The window was named Lucy.
Lucia.
Yeah,
yes.
well, Lucia, L-U-C-I-A. And I have a daughter named Lucia Sophia.
Oh, wow.
So that's light and wisdom.
Wisdom.
So for a lighting man, that's very important. And then we have the teaching of the children again,
Yes.
I believe, in this window. So this great crossing really is sort of the center of the church, with the sanctuary at one side and then the nave moving down the other. And at the end you have a great west window, which is facing south,
I believe so.
but it's called, in liturgical direction is west,
West window.
the west window.
Is there any design in that window that?
But just the overall diamonds, large diamonds, and probably Scheffler designed that one as well. But they wanted more light coming in that window, so it's not really painted. It's a source of illumination
Yes.
for the church and for the congregation. Yeah.
And this we believe to be St. Bernard, the Trappist or the Cistercian,
Okay.
and the writer of the Memorare,
And then last is St. Cecilia,
up in the choir.
up in the choir loft, patron of choirs.
And
Gregory.
St. Gregory the Great.
Yeah, I should instantly have known that bird, because we're just making a window now
Of St. Gregory.
of St. Gregory with that bird coming down and inspiring him.
And then we have, we believe John the Evangelist,
Oh, John the Evangelist, sure, that could be John.
with the Gloriam Videmus Eius,
Yeah.
Sinus Glory.
I've just been to Ephesus.
Ah,
I'm doing a shrine at the National Shrine for Our Lady of Ephesus.
Oh, good.
So I went to the Basilica of John, which is there. Of course, he
Yes.
lived there, and he brought Our Lady to
Our Lady was
Ephesus.
there, exactly.
And then the great basilica was built to Our Lady, and the Council of Ephesus took place in it.
And that we believe to be St. Margaret.
St. Mary Magdalene? St. Mary Magdalene, yeah, that makes sense,
Yeah.
with the ointment and,
With the urn in a hand.
yeah.
And the,
Well, you have the great saints of the Catholic, of the Christian world up here.
I believe St. Cecilia, St. Stephen. I'm sorry.
Yes, the first martyr.
First martyr, the deacon.
Yeah, no stones killing him or anything, but that would be logical.
Yes. And then this we believe to be Our Lady.
Okay. Our Lady of Grace, or
Yes.
whatever we want to.
Now, the question that we had was, some time ago, back in 1936, the pastor at the time, Monsignor Deegan, suggested that these windows along the nave here were indicative of prayer. And he tried to apply to various stained glass windows various prayers and that type of thing. You see any significance to that yourself? Or?
Well, I, when I first looked at them, was trying to see if they interconnected, other than in well, down here, the life of Christ, up there, if there was a sequence. But they're, I think, the great personages. And so each one would have his own.
Yes.
I don't know that there's a direct prayer, but that each one would have his own contribution to make.
And then these on the bottom down here, this life of Christ, as you say, you think they're done by the same artist too? Or?
I think they're done by the one who did the transept windows. Now, if Scheffler did one series, let's say, in 25, and the other series in 28 or something,
Yeah,
and he could have evolved or changed his style a bit, or maybe the architect said, you know, let's have them all, let's have lighter windows and darker windows. But they're rich, they're fragmented, there are lots of little pieces.
Yes, they're gorgeous.
And that gives you a color vibration.
Yes.
And they're gorgeous windows, yes, particularly if the sun is coming through and you can feel that intensity of the color. Well, the stations that are out here, I believe, and they're beautifully set into the wall, and they're more or less a deep constone color. And I did look out in the lobby because one of the booklets you sent me said that the narthex had constone, but it's all painted, so it's pretty hard to tell. But these, I think, are plaster. So I think they're antiqued and glazed. Constone is the limestone that came from Normandy, from Caen. And the aficionados of the Gothic revival thought that the most beautiful limestone of all was the constone because it was a warm, golden limestone. And so if the architect had a good budget, he would want to be using constone. As we were saying that the windows were made by Emil Frey, a great stained glass firm that continued on until recently, and still there are remnants of it. The marble work is done by an outstanding Italian firm, De Prato, which no longer exists, but they were very strong at the turn of the century and then here in the 1920s. So this is a Gothic, a marble Gothic reredos, which in those days they combined the altar, the tabernacle, and the reredos all together into one piece. So you have an engaged altar, mensa and palliato, and then you have an engaged tabernacle, and then you have a reredos. And with the Gothic trims and spires and crockets and so forth and so on, finials. Then we have, of course, the Second Vatican Council. And rather than facing the liturgical east, rather than facing the rising sun, which is theoretically what the priest was doing when he was facing the reredos in the east and praying to God, we were asked to turn around to the congregation and gather around the altar. And so St. Augustine's went through a renovation in 1991 and created this new altar sacrifice from the altar rail.
That's right.
And
the footings on the altar rail.
The footings on the altar rail, and a mensa that was scaled to a priest standing facing the congregation. So you have a Botticino mensa, I believe, and that altar is the altar rail is Botticino with some other details. So now you have an independent freestanding altar, and then you have the Blessed Sacrament reserved at the Sacred Heart. And now we get to the statues, which is what your question was.
That's right. But before we leave the altar, I just wanted to ask you about that work behind the crucifix, for example, all of that mosaic work along the sides there. It seems to be rather illustrative of that time.
Yeah, well, I think that could be by the artist. Did you say his name was Schindler?
No, Scheffler. Yeah.
Scheffler. I think Scheffler could have designed those mosaics because they sort of have a little bit of recall from the windows.
Yes.
And and they are, of course, Venetian, schmalti, tesserae, in other words, glass tesserae that's cut, and it's the cut through that's facing out, and those little tesserae in blue and red, and the gold is pure gold. I mean, it's glass with gold leaf on it. And so that's like a decoration or a Pugin, to go back to Pugin, 1850, Pugin had decoration that he would have put on the timbers, on the soffits of the arches of these beams, and that would have been a little bit like that. Or if it was French, it would be Viollet-le-Duc who would have done Pugin or let's say Gothic revival decoration like that. We've done it in lots of churches.
I'm sure.
So I think that's where that scheme, where that decoration comes from. And so this is the Prado marble work, polished, and the people who did the extension of the predella and brought the altar forward were more or less keeping in the same school. But then the Prado would have supplied the stations, would have made the stations, and the statues. So here you have Margaret Mary's Sacred Heart from the Visitation nun who had the visions of the Sacred Heart. The function of the reredos, in a way, as a designer, is like if you're shooting a rifle on a rifle range and you have a bullseye and you have the big circle and then a medium circle and a small circle, and then you hit the bullseye. Well, this is a vast space, and if you had this whole space and a man standing there, the scale would be out of whack. He'd look dwarfed. But you're coming in with a reredos and then coming in with the altar, and so you're adjusting the scale down to the human figure. And that's part of the, also to draw the eye with more detail. The walls are fairly plain, and then you get to the reredos, and there's a whole lot of rich detail there. And it pulls the eye in and holds the eye.
We know that the church, when it was built in 1926 through 28, when it was opened, cost about $400,000. What would something like this be from your expertise? What would you consider?
Well, I'm working on some new churches, and a church of about this size and richness. Now, I'm not saying Gothic revival, but we're doing a St. Gregory the Great, which I mentioned before, down in Hamilton Park in New Jersey, and others. I would, without knowing the dollars, in other words, a subway token was 5 cents in 28, and today it's $1.50. And what that means, that's 30 times. But I would say this is a $4 million building, something like that. So that's only 10 times, but it's at least 10 times.
Yes.
Because the rich, I don't know that you could exactly produce, it would be an effort to produce a Gothic revival church today. Well, here we are as we finish at the entrance to the church. This is a marvelous Gothic screen that the architect designed with a beautiful balcony front and a carved fretwork all the way across, and then this vine that is on the return, and then the stained glass screen, so that the people who are in the narthex aren't disturbing the people who are worshiping in the church, and yet they can sort of see through and see what's going on. Or the bride can stand there as she gets ready to come into the church.
That's right.
And then it's a lower ceiling in the narthex, in the entrance area. And so you're huddled a little bit, and then as you come through the door, oh my, it just raises up and opens up. And so that's the psychology of the architect is playing a little bit with you to have you appreciate the vastness of the space.
It's a vast space, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah. Well, I love the two plaques that you have. Having been, as you said, in the Army, you have the Second World War men. So many people served. And then Vietnam and Korea.
Yes, we have both.
Yeah.
We have remembrance over here now that we put up for the people who come from this parish and from the Larchmont itself, people who died at the World Trade Center.
Oh my, did you have some who died?
Oh, yeah, we had all these people here. It was such, and they were parishioners here, and there's one or two that were just...
Am I reading this correctly? Of 3, 6, 9?
Right, that's right. The Larchmont, yes.
Oh my.
Yes. And so this is the church, and the great floor, as you mentioned before. It's extraordinary.
Yes.
So
it's a beautiful church, and you are lucky to be enjoying it, and the parishioners are lucky.
we are very grateful to you for coming today. It's been a great experience for all of us. And we want to keep this as part of our archives and to show it to the children and to the people of the parish as the years go on.
And then they are prepared to go to Europe and enjoy English Gothic revival architecture in York and Durham and Westminster
Very much
Abbey.
so. Okay.